Ubie is a Japanese, we're still a startup, especially in terms of culture, but we've been around for about 7 years. We're founded in Japan by a machine learning engineer and a internal medicine doctor, actually old high school buddies who set out to develop a doctor that you could reach at your fingertips. Not exactly, everyone here is familiar with that kind of idea. But I want to share some of the lessons we've learned over the last 7 or so years about how we can, what principles you can apply to new approaches, and some of the ideas that I think are going to be most exciting in this space. Patients are expecting better and better experiences. The digital health market is about $170 billion last year. So many different approaches here. You've got the pure D2C plays, the Smile Directs, Hims and Hers, Row, whatever, as well as the actual care providers, the teledocs, the ZocDocs. You probably don't need to dive too deeply here, but one piece I did want to mention is Lilly Direct's really interesting, innovative approach, and I think represents the next phase for life sciences of integrating and trying to cross that desert as much as possible and own that patient experience. I expect that we're going to see more and more of approaches like that over the next few years. However, that massive market and all of those tools also leaves patients overwhelmed by the sheer content out there. So many of these tools and resources are point solutions that aren't fully integrated, and very much, as we just mentioned, leaves the cognitive burden on patients to try and navigate what they need to do when, what the right resources are. And so that's very much part of Ubie's story that we'll get to in a few minutes. But I just wanted to say, when we speak about AI, the beauty of AI is its ability to adapt complex patient needs. Patients want simple solutions that decrease friction, that help them cross that desert, cross that chasm from symptom onset to treatment and resolution. And the beauty of AI is that if you can incorporate patient and HCP inputs and any other data sets that you can get, develop it in an actionable data set, and create a model that can develop insights and customize experiences, or customize what resources, or customize other actions based on those insights, you can develop a dynamic system that helps the right patient at the right time with the right tools. And I want to highlight one piece here at the bottom around this concept of data collection. So much about so much in AI right now is all about applying data sets, but really, in my view, the future is going to belong to the people who are able to collect data as well as apply it. So the importance of developing trusted relationships with patients doesn't really need it. I think that probably goes without saying from a branding perspective, but from a data collection perspective, it's going to be increasingly important, especially as privacy regulations put increased scrutiny on third-party data use on those observational data sets. And frankly, as those observational data sets, those claims and EHR data databases that we're all familiar with, as those get more and more commoditized, the ability to use those for competitive advantage is getting eroded. So the people who are, in my view, the people who will own the future are the ones who own the patient relationship and can use that to create differentiated data sets that allow unique insights. And I think that creates a bit of a flywheel. So that concept's called zero-party data. That's data that is directly and intentionally shared with an organization from a consumer or from a user. This is distinct from first and third-party data in fairly obvious ways, but happy to address this in more detail later if you guys are interested. I think that if I'm thinking about the audience here, I'd be very much thinking about how you can build data collection into your processes as well. So don't need to spend too much time here. We've already covered this a fair bit, but there's so many different ways AI can be applied here, from matching the right providers to the right patients in virtual consultations, remote patient monitoring to identify adverse events or opportunities for additional care. Personalized medicine, tons of attention there. Early disease detection, maybe from EKGs, as well as RPM tools, you name it. And then again, just getting to self-service and health management, trying to use AI to get patients to the right resources quicker. But let me flip this a little bit on its head. At Ubie, we believe good product design has to always start with the patient journey in mind. So this is a bit of a oversimplified view of what a patient journey looks like from symptom onset and awareness education all the way to moving them into the feedback and advocacy world. And we have each a sample of their needs at each step along the way, as well as some of the products that we have already or considering developing at the bottom here. You'll notice that with all of these AI solutions, though, all of them have a few things in common. They're dealing with complexity dynamically, they're leveraging existing data sets, and really, again, to get back to that zero-party concept, they're collecting additional data through their own use. They're creating that flywheel effect. So originally, our co-founders, as I mentioned, a doc and a machine learning engineer, they were setting out to create a CDS tool to really help with the assessment and diagnosis phase. But early on, they realized that getting the patient into the system, even in a place with as excellent access as Japan, getting patients to the right clinic at the right time was one of the most challenging steps. That is the rate limiting step. If you can't get patients in, you can't get them diagnosed, you can't get them treated. So let me tell you a little bit about what we learned from building a symptom checker focused on that first phase, and that first step along the patient journey, and built that into something that's used by over 9.5 million people every month. The single biggest point is that it's not just about the tech. I'm sure a lot of you are already working on some fascinating innovation projects. And I just want to share, again, like just sharing a few of our lessons over the last 7 years. The most important thing is not the tech, it's the patient experience. So you have to keep the patient experience in mind throughout at every step along the journey. Once you've accepted that, in my opinion, there are 4 key things to keep in mind as you build this tool. The first and foremost is relevance. Does this solve a problem that patients are facing? This first and foremost means that you have to ensure there's actually a pain point to address, but it also means that you have to ensure the tech does do what you need it to do. So for Ubie, that meant ensuring as high levels of accuracy as possible. So we're presenting the right resources to the right patients at the right time. So we developed a very large clinical network for our HCP workflow tools across 1,500 clinics and hospitals in Japan. About 20,000 providers every month use our tool, where the clinicians actually provide feedback on the quality of our predictions on an ongoing basis. So we're continually learning based on that real world evidence loop. Once you've figured out how to build a tool that solves the problem, the next thing is to make sure that patients are actually going to be willing to use it. Especially if you are building any type of zero-party data collection into the solution, you need to make sure that it's trustworthy enough for patients to actually use. So in our case, that meant building in, being very transparent about our clinical data sources, as well as our clinical oversight staff. We've got 75 or so physicians who review everything that we put out. But it also means engaging with trusted advocacy groups. And I recommend that this is an excellent opportunity for any internal pharma projects as well. These guys want to work with you. They want to make sure that their patients are finding the right resources. So awesome opportunity for both for us as well as directly for pharma. The next important piece is ensuring that there's empathy, building empathetically. Will patients actually want to use this? So put yourself into their shoes, especially if you're going to collect data. You need to make sure that the value of the product to the user is enough to get their data in return. So in our case, this means speaking in user interpretable terms, avoiding fear as much as possible. We actually just introduced a brand character, like a mascot, to try and further minimize the fear patients might feel. And this is definitely an issue with some of the ISI content that obviously is essential for pharma, but there still are ways to build, make it clear that you care to cut down on that fear aspect. And the final piece, and this is probably the hardest, is this takes experimentation. You need to collect data on yourself as rigorously as you do on others. A lot of great ideas in theory, not necessarily going to be in practice. One of the most interesting cases here is that we actually explored using in our symptom checker, everything is still multiple choice. We explored integrating an LLM to make it more of a chat function. And what we found is that users actually preferred the multiple choice version, and the amount of time and information that they shared with us was significantly greater, and the completion rate was higher. So seems like a cool idea, great tech, but not necessarily not necessarily right for these users. So I'd recommend thinking about this upfront. Ensure that there's change management in place to make sure that your organization understands that developing these tools is not a one-shot deal. Especially thinking through any MLR implications is going to be especially important here. And just to make sure that you're building intelligently to avoid any issues down the line. So let me show you quickly what this looks like in action. I'm going to zip around this demo a little bit just in the interest of time. But as you can see, the first thing is when users come on the board, we're trying to make this as easy as possible. It's a web app. I would emphasize that oftentimes the friction from a native app can outweigh the value you can get from push notifications and other sort of other data collection opportunities. But I'll walk you through this very quickly, but we collect a huge amount of data while still minimizing the survey burden. We use AI to actually select the right questions to minimize the survey time. And so that means every patient who comes through is going to get a slightly different survey based on the answers to their previous questions. Making sure that there are opportunities to have redundant or maybe seemingly redundant symptoms in different phrasing is also very important, getting back to that empathy concept. Let me skip forward a little bit. Trying to be complete without being overwhelming. This is a constant debate for us, so it's constantly a refinement issue, but making sure that you're capturing all the data you need to provide value to the patient without ruining the experience is frankly our biggest challenge. So skipping ahead a little bit, let me show you a bit more. Sorry, backing up here. So as you go, you'll also see that we have places where we will explain why we're asking questions. Again, you want to educate patients. You want to make sure that you're explaining why and that you're not just being intrusive for the sake of it. Here we go. I want to also mention that one of the coolest things about being a third party and collecting this type of data is that we can consent patients in to be recontacted. So obviously there are different limitations if you're internal versus external at a given at a covered entity, but we are able to collect this information that allows us to follow up with patients and collect additional data on the outcomes on did they see a doctor? Did they get prescribed? All of that type of outcome data that you'd otherwise be relying on for claims data typically. And then you can see here the results page where we provide the predictions and provide those educational resources. We want to keep this as simple as possible, trying to make it really clear if patients really need to see a doctor. In this case, where nothing is terribly urgent. And then we have information on the disease. We're phrasing things in word language that patients will understand. We're explaining what the related symptoms were that they attested to. And then really crucially, we're explaining what the next steps are. We're saying typically diabetes is treated by either PCP or an endocrinologist. And we explain a little bit about what the treatment will entail. And then to cut down on that, to try and bridge that desert gap, we try to connect patients to care directly out from the platform to let them make an appointment to go get seen. And as well as provide some, again, to cut down on fear, we want to provide some social support and make it clear they're not alone. That is most of what I wanted to share. I just wanted to show one of the interesting things that we've found in our user testing is that patients find a lot of value from the transparency we provide. We give them a summary of their symptomology. And really crucially, we also allow them to download a version of this to take with them to their doctor. And this is actually the most used feature. Over 20% of users end up doing this. And then again, just additional data collection. I'd emphasize that you have when you're building a tool, you have an incredible opportunity to earn that right to collect additional data. And we do see fairly high rates of completion of these surveys. Um, so that is what I wanted to show you there. Frankly, the single best way to get a sense of the tool, though, is to just play with it yourself. So I'll provide a QR code. I just wanted to quickly share a quick case study of what this looks like in action. So we were working with a large multinational pharma company in Japan on a project to promote the diagnosis of a rare disease called hereditary angioedema. And this is just one patient story. This was a woman who'd been suffering from these vague symptoms over 10 years. She often would have seemingly random swelling of her hands, face, and feet. She would experience intermittent abdominal pain and diarrhea every 3 months or so. She saw her PCP as well as her dermatologist, but didn't really get any kind of definitive diagnosis. And finally, again, after over 10 years of suffering from this, she found Ubie when Googling for her symptoms, specifically around swollen hands and feet. She found us as a promoted link on the top of the results page. About 3 minutes later, she was alerted to the fact that she might have HAE. Ubie's educational materials suggested she follow up with an appropriate specialist. She saw an immunologist, and within a few months afterwards, she was already being diagnosed with HAE and on treatment and was receiving a palliative trend. So this is a little bit of an illustration of how we work with pharma. We find we decide on what type of patient population we want to find. We help them go find it, and then we connect them to the right resources, both on our page, connecting out to pharma's resources, hosting media, all of that. And I should say too that we don't just work with pharma, we also work extensively with patient advocacy groups. We just announced a new Cushing's Foundation partnership last week. And we also do medical device work as well, as you can imagine.